Timeline 1937. Japan invades China. 1940. Edward Zhende Hu Zhende, is born. 1941. United States enters World War II. 1942. Joseph joins the U.S. Army and becomes a naturalized U.S. citizen. 1943. The Chinese Exclusion Act is repealed. March 25, 1943. Grace and her family attend the parades in honor of Madame Chiang Kai-shek's visit to San Francisco. 1944. The Suicide Squad is formalized as the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, operating under the Army. 1945. World War II ends. Grace. 11 years earlier. Chinatown was thick with flags and streamers and flowers. Red, white, and blue American and Chinese flags. Long red ribbons fluttering from lampposts. White-petaled apricot blossoms with their soft pink hearts blushing in polished windows. Madame Chiang Kai-shek was visiting San Francisco, and the sun itself seemed to glow with particular warmth to mark her arrival, slanting between the buildings to gild every flag and streamer in golden light. Grace Hu had caught the fever that gripped the entire city. Earlier that morning, she staked out a spot on Grant Avenue between a corner kiosk and a lamppost to watch China's First Lady process through Chinatown. Grace's mother had dragged an empty crate onto the curb and sat there with 2-year-old Eddie perched on her lap, miraculously calm for the moment. Lily, who was 6, leaned back against Grace as they waited. That afternoon, Lily would join thousands of Chinatown's children in a parade through Civic Center, and Grace would march with her, one of dozens of volunteer mothers who would corral the children through the city. Now, Grace imagined, was the calm before that storm.
佢話佢好虛弱,
Grace's mother said.
無論佢走到邊度，都有白車跟住佢.
They say she is very frail. She has an ambulance following her wherever she goes.
但佢一定要好堅強，先可以橫跨美國演講.
But she must be very strong to endure this tour across America, Grace said.
為中國，佢會忍受一切.
She will endure whatever she needs to endure for China. Grace's knowledge of her mother's Cantonese dialect was limited to what was spoken at home. She couldn't always fully understand when her mother talked about politics, but she knew her mother well enough to hear the cynicism in her tone. She was about to ask her what exactly she meant when Lily interrupted.
Mama, when will she get here?
Lily asked. Soon, Grace said.
But you said that a long time ago,
Lily complained. Grace laughed and squeezed her daughter close, and as Lily squealed half in protest, half in laughter, Grace bent down and said, "Any minute now, any minute." Eddie heard the anticipation in her voice and reached for her, his little fingers spreading wide. She tickled his pink palm with the tip of her finger and smiled as he giggled. Watching her son laughing on her mother's lap made her realize she didn't want to squabble with her mother about Madame Chiang. She wanted to enjoy the day. Her husband had joined the U.S. Army a year ago, and today was the first day she had felt optimistic about the war. She was sure that Madame Chiang's tour of America could only bring greater American support to China in its struggle against Imperial Japan. She felt a distinct pride that her husband was part of the effort. Though he couldn't tell her much about what he was actually doing, she knew that he had been sent to China, and that he was working to save the lives of men from both of his countries, his homeland and his new adopted nation. At last, Grace heard the rising roar of the crowd heralding Madame Chiang's arrival at the gates of Chinatown. Grace's mother stood, lifting Eddie in her arms so that he too could see the approaching motorcade. Those in the crowd were waving their flags excitedly. Their cheers drowned out the sound of the motorcade's engines, and everyone leaned forward in unison, yearning to catch a glimpse of the one woman who had come to embody all of China. It was rumored that Madame Chiang might get out of her limousine and walk along Grant Avenue, and as the car rolled up the street, everyone waited for her to do just that. But she didn't stop. The dark-suited Secret Service men walking alongside the motorcade only gazed grimly back at the spectators from beneath the brims of their fedoras. But finally there it was. The limousine bedecked with flags, the polished fenders and windows gleaming in the sunlight. Grace urged her daughter to stand on the wooden crate so she could see China's First Lady. Grace spotted the flutter of a white handkerchief from the back seat. Madame Jiang was waving at them, but she didn't get out of the car. Everyone was saying that she must be too exhausted, and besides, she was about to go visit the leaders of Chinatown at the Six Company's headquarters. There was no time to linger here, greeting the ordinary Chinese of America. They should cheer louder, so she would know that the American Chinese supported her. Grace reminded herself, not for the first time, that Madame Jiang was practically half American, having been educated in the United States. She clung to this idea as the motorcade disappeared and was followed by the St. Mary's Drum Corps, beating a merry rhythm just as if it were Chinese New Year.
"Mama, I thought the parade was this afternoon," Lily said.
"There is another one this afternoon. This one is to welcome Madame Jiang to Chinatown."
"2 parades in one day?"
"Yes, 2 parades.
"This madam must be very important."
Grace smiled at her daughter.
"Yes, she is a very important Chinese woman indeed."
The disadvantage of being part of a parade, Grace realized, was that one didn't get to see the rest of it. But the historic moment must be appreciated, she told herself, as she marched back and forth to keep an eye on the 20 restless children she had been charged with supervising. Her group was but one of dozens, adding up to what she had heard was thousands of children. They were all dressed in traditional Chinese clothes, ranging from colorful caps tasseled in gold to white silk pajamas embroidered with pink flowers. Lily and her friend Shirley wore matching sky blue silk trousers and mandarin-collared jackets with yellow frog buttons. They were as enraptured with their costumes as they were with the importance of their endeavor, representing the young Chinese in America. The responsibility, imparted to them by Grace and the other mothers, seemed to rest lightly on their slim shoulders. They were simply thrilled to be gathered together with their friends beneath a clear afternoon sky on what should have been a school day. When it was finally their time to join the parade, Grace lined up her charges and led them toward Civic Center. The crowds that lined Polk Street were 30, 40 people deep. Grace couldn't see where they ended. As they neared City Hall, the cheering became thunderous, and she could feel the excitement rattling her bones, as if an earthquake were shaking the confetti-covered streets. They said that Madame Jiang was watching the parade from the balcony above the entrance to City Hall. Grace gazed up between the columns and saw tiny people there, but she couldn't recognize anyone. She didn't even see the white flash of Madame Jiang's handkerchief, which she must surely be waving at the masses gathered below her. Grace noticed a plane flying overhead, the groan of its engine swallowed by the cheering crowd. It pulled a wide white banner painted with a dark circle. The sight of it caused a sudden drop in her mood. It was a warplane towing a target sleeve out to the ocean, where it would be used for machine gun practice by Navy pilots rehearsing their attacks against the Japanese. She wondered if Madame Jiang saw it too. When the Lums invited the Hus to join them for dinner at their home after the parade, Grace was grateful to accept. The day had been exhilarating but exhausting, and she didn't want it to end by taking the children home to their small, dark apartment. Grace had often secretly envied the Lums. There was something very appealing to her about their large, boisterous family, with many generations and cousins all living together above their restaurant. And she admired the ease with which Ruby Lum, Shirley's mother, managed the entire household. There was a time, before Lily was born, when Grace had thought she would move to China with Joseph and be part of his family, as was proper for a Chinese wife. But the Japanese invasion of Shanghai had scuttled those plans. Sometimes she was still resentful about it. Instead of taking her rightful position in Joseph's family as the wife of the eldest son, she had been relegated to this faraway city alone. She knew she should be grateful to her mother for moving in with her to help with the children while Joseph was in the army, but she struggled to find her gratitude. She felt as if she had somehow moved home again, like a penniless widowed daughter, even though the situation was the opposite. She could never let Joseph know she felt this way. To think that she would envy the wife of a restaurant owner, even a successful one, over her own position as the wife of a Stanford-educated doctor. In China, Joseph's family would outrank the Lums. But here in America, Grace wasn't sure the same social stratification applied. People treated Joseph with respect to his face, but Grace knew that to many of Chinatown's residents, all those old bachelors crowded 6 to a room, Dr. Joseph Hu was an uppity Shanghainese who didn't speak their language. All of this crossed her mind as she followed her mother up the stairs to the Lums' living room. She wondered what Madame Jiang would think of the Lums. Their home was cluttered with Chinese furniture and paintings, but it was a pleasant sort of clutter, speaking to the family's success. Lily and Shirley were already running back to the room Shirley shared with her sisters, and though Grace told them to be quiet, she knew they wouldn't listen. Eddie was fussy, and he took some time to settle down for a much-needed nap. By the time Grace returned to the living room, Ruby had already had food brought up from the restaurant downstairs. On the dining table were platters of fried noodles, water spinach, and braised fish. Rosie, the oldest Lum daughter, carried in a stack of bowls, a dozen flat-bottomed spoons, and a container of chopsticks, and Ruby brought a tureen of pork bone soup from the family's small kitchen. The dinner was casual and loud. Rice wine was poured, and the older men of the Lum family, the younger ones had enlisted in the army, started to talk very brashly about the war. How America would send airplanes and guns and soldiers and bombs. How the Japanese would be slaughtered as ruthlessly as they had slaughtered the Chinese. Ruby and Grace shared a skeptical glance that turned into a smile, and then Ruby gestured for Grace to move with her to the sofa. One of the restaurant's waiters had brought up a basket of steamed custard buns, and they each took one along with a cup of tea over to the quieter half of the living room, sitting near Grace's mother. "Do you think they're right?" Grace asked, eyeing the men. "Will America really send all that aid to China?" Ruby shrugged.
"Who can tell? The president has said he would, but so far America has not lived up to its promises."
"If anyone can persuade President Roosevelt to help China, Madame Chiang can," Grace said. "Have you seen the way the newspapers cover her? They love her."
"They love the woman she presents to them."
"You think she's putting on a false front?" Ruby shook her head.
"Not false. Practiced. Prepared. She's so American. That's why they love her." "They love her because she's beautiful," Grace's mother said.
The men burst into laughter over some joke that Grace didn't hear. It was jarring in the wake of her mother's statement. Grace said, "She's intelligent, too."
"Of course she is," Ruby said. "She's intelligent enough to make sure she's beautiful." "Oh, I know you like her, Grace. I like her, too. But she's still a woman. Can she really persuade all those Caucasian men to help China? They might love her, but I'm not so sure they love China."
"They love it more than Japan," Grace pointed out. Out of the corner of her eye, she glimpsed Lily running into the living room, and she called out, "Lily, no running!" Lily slowed down, but then Shirley grabbed her hand and tugged her toward the windows at the front of the living room. The curtains were still drawn back, and the red and white neon of the Eastern Pearls sign glowed through the glass. Shirley dragged a low ottoman over to the window and climbed on top of it. Lily followed, and Grace was about to warn her daughter to be careful when she realized what they were doing. Standing on the ottoman, the windowsill was at the girl's waist level, and they leaned against it as if it were a balcony. They each clutched a white restaurant napkin in their right hands and waved them at the dark street below. Part 5. Lush Life. December 1954 to January 1955. Chapter 30. Kath was alone when Lily met her on their designated corner the night of December 30th. "Jean's not coming," Kath said as soon as she saw Lily. "She's saving up for tomorrow night. It's going to be a big show, apparently." "I'm sorry you won't get to see that," Lily said, though she felt a twinge of relief at Jean's absence. "It's all right," Kath said. "I'd rather go tonight." Lily wondered if that meant Kath would rather be here with her than with Jean, and she felt a brief flush of excitement. She fumbled with her scarf, rewrapping it around her neck. The night was foggy and downright cold, and gusts of wind kept tugging the scarf loose. "How was your Christmas?" Kath asked as they started walking toward the club. "I got a handbag," Lily said. She hadn't intended to sound so glum, but the glumness was unintentionally funny, and both she and Kath broke into laughter. "You didn't want one?" Kath asked. "I guess I didn't," Lily said. "What did you get?" They discussed Christmas for a little while longer, and then they had to stop talking as they crossed Broadway, taking care to avoid a clump of men going in the opposite direction. When they arrived on the other side, Lily said, "I've been thinking how strange it is that I never used to do this, and now it seems almost normal." She paused. "Not exactly normal, but you know what I mean?" "I know." "Isn't it strange that nobody in our regular lives knows about it? That they think we're at home asleep?"
"Well, you don't want them to know, do you?"
"No," Lily said quickly. Of course she didn't want anyone in her regular life to know. The very thought of it was horrifying. No, it was better to do this in secret. At the club, there was a short line waiting outside. Mickey was working again, but she didn't recognize Lily at first, so she had to unwind her scarf and say, "I've been here before." Behind her, a woman said, "Is that you, Lily?" She turned around in surprise, and a petite woman in a belted raincoat came forward and said, "It's me, Claire. Remember me?" Lily shook Claire's hand, and then Claire shook Kath's hand, too. Claire was with Paula again. Lily remembered her, and the four of them went into the club together, finding a table on the left side of the stage room near the back. This time, a waitress in a black cocktail dress with a little white apron tied around her waist moved between the tables, taking orders and delivering trays of drinks. "Hello, girls. We have champagne on special tonight," she said when she arrived at their table. "Let's have a round for all of us," Paula said. "It's on me." It took several minutes for the waitress to return, and while they waited, they talked about the upcoming show, whether Tommy would do any new numbers, and whether she should retire any of her standards. "She's been here for a while. At the Telegraph Club, I mean," Claire said. "Several months at least." "I'm surprised Joyce has kept her on for so long," Paula said. "She must be bringing in the business," Claire said. "How many times have we been here? Half a dozen at least."
"Who's Joyce?"
Kath asked. "Joyce Morgan, the owner," Paula said. "She's usually behind the bar."
"Where was Tommy before?"
Kath asked. "The paper doll, maybe," Claire said. "I never saw her there." "She used to park cars for a living," Paula said. "Over at that parking lot by Columbus." "Can you imagine?" Claire said, laughing. "Having your car parked by the likes of Tommy Andrews." "I don't think she was going by Tommy Andrews back then," Paula said. The waitress returned, carrying 4 coupes of champagne on a small round tray. "Happy early New Year," Paula said, and they all raised their glasses and carefully clinked them together to avoid spilling the liquid. Lily took a tentative sip. It was sour and a little flat. Paula grimaced. "I don't think this is French, but it'll get the job done." Claire said, "Oh, Paula." The pianist came out then, and the spotlight snapped on, and they all fell silent as they waited for the show to begin. Lily drank her cheap champagne too quickly, and by the time Tommy Andrews stepped on stage, she was lightheaded and a little too warm, as if summer had bloomed inside the club and wrapped her in its lazy heat. She didn't mind at all. At the break, Claire and Paula went up to the bathroom, and when they returned, they had Lana Jackson in tow. Lana had been drinking a martini, and when the waitress returned to take new orders, Lana greeted her by name. "How's your night going, Betty?" and asked for another. Paula and Claire ordered martinis too, and Lana suggested that Betty simply bring a pitcher for the table. Kath said, "I'll just have a beer, thanks." "What about you, miss?" Betty asked Lily. "Just a beer, thanks." "You don't look like a beer drinker," Lana said, lighting a cigarette. "You sure you don't want a martini?" "I've never had one." Lana's darkly penciled eyebrows lifted, and she smiled at Lily before she looked at Betty. "The China doll will have a martini, too." Lily wasn't sure if she should feel flattered or insulted. Lana offered her silver cigarette case around the table, and Claire said, "I'll take one. Did you hear about Ruth Schmidt?" "Ruthie from San Mateo?" Lana said. "Yes. Have you heard?" "No. What happened?" Claire leaned into the lighter that Paula held out for her, inhaling quickly.
She told me some G-man asked her to be an informant.
Lily, and everyone else, stared at Claire in surprise.
An informant?
Lana exclaimed.
I thought she was working over at the shipyard. Yes, as a typist. But apparently the feds think her new boyfriend is a pinko.
Lana's eyebrows rose again.
Really? You mean little Marty Coleman? The car salesman?
Claire laughed.
The shoe salesman. Yes, the feds think he's involved in a communist organization, and they want her to spy on him for them. I told her she should throw him over for a real woman.
The word communist was jarring to Lily, as if someone had thrown a rock through a glass window. But the women at the table continued talking and smoking as if nothing had happened.
I thought they were done with that kind of snooping now that McCarthy's out,
Paula said.
Apparently not,
Lana said. Claire blew out a stream of smoke impatiently.
You'd think they would avoid asking Ruthie to be an informant, given her past association with homosexuals.
She said the word homosexuals sarcastically, as if it were a joke, but the word still sounded obscene to Lily.
Do you really think the feds know?
Lana asked doubtfully.
Oh, they know all right,
Claire said.
She said I should be on the lookout in case they came to interview me, because they told her they knew about us.
You didn't tell me that,
Paula said, startled.
It doesn't matter,
Claire said casually, but there was a tension in the way she brought the cigarette to her mouth and drew on it, deeply.
I'm a nobody. I work in a dentist's office. No Russians could possibly be interested in anything I do.
Lily was increasingly bewildered by the conversation. These women were talking as if it were all a good joke, and yet there was an undercurrent to their tone that suggested something darker. She wanted to ask for more details, but she didn't think she had the right. She barely knew Claire. She barely knew any of these women. She glanced at Kath, who had a slightly puzzled expression on her face as if she didn't really understand either. The waitress returned with their drinks, and Lana scooted her chair out of the way so that Betty could set down the pitcher of martinis, 4 cocktail glasses, and a beer.
It's on the house, Betty said.
Thanks, Lana said.
Say, what are you up to after the second act tonight? We're having a little party up at our place. You want to join us?
I'm supposed to go out with Cheryl, Betty said.
Bring her.
Lana smiled archly.
Tommy loves Cheryl.
Betty laughed and shook her head.
If by love you mean hate. No, but thanks, doll. I'll tell Cheryl you said hello.
You do that, Lana said, and then Betty had to leave to attend to another table. Lana poured the martinis, then raised hers in a toast.
Cheers,
she said as she clinked her cocktail glass against Claire's. Lily did the same, holding hers carefully to avoid spilling the clear liquid. The drink smelled astringent, practically medicinal, and when she took a tiny sip, it was sharp on her tongue and a shock to swallow, like cold fire. She wasn't sure if she liked it or not.
You should come too, Claire,
Lana was saying.
All of you should come over after the show. It would be lovely to have some new faces around. I'm getting a little tired of Tommy's friends.
She said the word friends dryly, sharing a knowing look with Claire. Lily wondered what Lana meant. She wondered if the invitation to her party truly included her and Kath. And then she began to hope that it did.
Chapter 31. After the second act, Tommy came through the crowded room with an entire bottle of the cheap champagne and pulled up an empty chair between Lana and Claire, who made room without being asked. Lily caught Claire looking around a little self-consciously, as if she knew others in the club were eyeing her proximity to Tommy and wondering who she was. Lana called Betty over to clear away the empty glasses and bring over fresh ones. As Tommy reached over to pour champagne, her cologne drifted toward Lily. The scent was heady, like being drunk on a leather sofa. It made Lily's skin go warm. Tommy sat back in her chair, lit a cigarette, and downed a coupe of champagne in one gulp.
That stuff's terrible, she groused. I'll have to tell Joyce not to serve it tomorrow night.
It's on special,
Lana said in a bored tone of voice.
I think she's trying to get rid of it.
So she's pawning it off on me and my fans? Of course. Gotta save the best for Miss Rita Rogers.
There was a jealous sting to her words, and Lily wondered who Rita Rogers was.
Kath leaned over to her and said, "I'm going up to the bathroom. Come with me?" Lily didn't want to leave the table now that Tommy had arrived, but there was a look in Kath's eye that made her get up. When they reached the dim hallway that contained the stairs going up to the bathroom, Lily caught a glimpse of a woman slipping into the shadows beneath the stairs. She stared for a moment, confused. The woman's body was moving in an unusual way. Her shoulders were bent forward, her head dipping, and all of a sudden Lily realized the woman wasn't alone. There was another woman with her beneath the stairs, the edges of her skirt visible around the other woman's legs. They were pressed together, their heads close. Lily couldn't see exactly what they were doing, but she had a good idea. She hurried after Kath, who was already standing in the unusually short bathroom line. Kath must have noted her flushed face because she asked, "What happened?"
Nothing,
she said, flustered. Kath seemed a bit tense.
"Do you want to go over to Lana's with everyone?"
Lily tried to put the image of those two women out of her mind.
Do you think they really meant to invite us?
"I don't know. Maybe."
Kath's forehead furrowed as she glanced up the line and then back at Lily.
"If we go, it'll be late. When do you need to get home?"
Kath had never been concerned about getting home late before. Lily looked at her more closely, but couldn't read the expression on her face.
Well, it's already late, Lily said. Who's going to notice if I'm a couple of hours later? But what about you? Do you want to go?
Kath's shoulders hunched slightly.
"Only if you do."
Well, yes. I don't really want to go home. Do you?
Kath seemed to be holding something back.
"I guess not."
Lily was about to ask what was wrong, but they had reached the bathroom door and it was Kath's turn to go in, so Lily was left standing in the hallway. By the time they were both finished, the moment had passed, so Lily said nothing. They went downstairs together, and at the bottom she looked behind her at the alcove beneath the stairs, but it was empty. Back at their table, Tommy and Lana and the others were all standing up and putting on their coats, getting ready to leave. Lana saw her and Kath, and said,
"We're walking up to Telegraph Hill. Are you coming along?"
Kath plucked their jackets from the backs of their empty chairs, handing Lily hers.
"Sure, we're coming. Thanks."
They spilled out onto the sidewalk, a group of half a dozen. Lily kept close to Kath, and they followed the others up a side street that was cut with stairs, it was so steep. When they started out from the club, they had been talking gaily, laughing and joking. But as they proceeded through North Beach, their voices grew hushed. Lily lost track of where they were going. All around them, the neighborhood slumbered, a world removed from the noise and music of the nightclubs a few blocks away. They finally arrived on a flat block just below Coit Tower, which was lit up at the top of Telegraph Hill like a beacon. Someone took out a ring of keys, and Lily heard a crunch as a key turned in the lock of a 3-story building. A light was switched on and spilled out, yellowish, onto the front stoop.
"Come on in,"
Tommy called back, and they all crowded through the doorway, into the front hall, and through a second door on the right into a first-floor apartment. At first, Lily got the impression of a jumble of different dark lumps everywhere. But as Tommy and Lana went around switching on the lamps, the lumps resolved themselves into a long, rust-colored sofa and a set of black lacquered Chinese chairs like the kind that were sold to tourists in the Grant Avenue shops. There was a mission-style coffee table, an octagonal end table like something out of Arabian Nights, and a medieval-looking bench by the door where Lana told everyone to leave their coats. Past the living room was a small dining room, with a white formica and chrome dinette set and an antique mirrored buffet, on top of which were clustered several bottles and cocktail glasses. Lana went through to the kitchen, announcing that she would bring back a bucket of ice, while Tommy disappeared down the hall, loosening her tie. Lily left her coat on the bench with the others and wandered over to the rust-colored sofa. Above it were several framed photos hung in a somewhat haphazard order. There were a couple of snapshots of Tommy standing with other male impersonators on a busy street. Lily thought it might be in front of the Telegraph Club. There was a picture of Tommy with her arm around Lana, the Golden Gate Bridge in the background. Tommy was wearing a sweater beneath an unbuttoned jacket, a cigarette drooping out of her mouth. Lana had a polka-dotted scarf tied over her blonde hair and wore a trench coat and sunglasses. They were both reluctantly smiling, as if the photographer had been scolding them into doing it. And centered over the sofa was a large glossy picture of Tommy Andrews that Lily recognized as the original of the headshot that had been printed in the Chronicle. Seeing the photo on the wall was somehow shocking. Here she was in Tommy Andrews' apartment. Tommy Andrews! She had gazed at her photo in the paper, this photo, countless times, and now she was in this woman's home. It was as if time had stuttered, and she was back in the Eastern Pearl surreptitiously tearing the ad from the paper. She could still hear the dull ripping sound, the crumple as she folded it. She felt detached from her body, and when she closed her eyes for a moment she might have been floating, untethered from the earth's gravity. She heard the sound of a record falling into place, the scratch of the needle as it struck vinyl. The song Black Magic began to play, and she felt her knee pressing against the edge of Tommy's sofa. She opened her eyes and turned around, feeling a little dizzy. She hadn't finished her martini. It had been too strong for her. But perhaps the champagne she had drunk earlier was still affecting her. She didn't know how to act in a place like this. And where was Kath? She couldn't see her anywhere. From the dining room, Lana announced that she had made a Spanish sangria and asked who wanted cocktails. There was a proprietary air to Lana's behavior that made Lily realize this wasn't Tommy's apartment. It was Tommy and Lana's. They lived here together. She sat down on the sofa, feeling like an idiot. The cushion was too soft, pulling her into an unexpectedly intimate embrace. More people arrived. They seemed to be mostly women, a few in Levi's with their cuffs rolled up, and she began to worry about where Kath had gone. But at last she spotted her emerging from the kitchen, carrying 2 wine glasses. Relieved, Lily waved at her, and Kath came to the sofa with the drinks. "It's sangria," Kath said, handing her a glass of red liquid. "There's fruit in it. I didn't think you'd want another martini." "Thank you," Lily said. Kath sat down beside her, and the softness of the sofa caused them to bump together. Kath nearly spilled her drink and apologized, but before she could scoot over, Claire reappeared, carrying a martini. When she sat down, the cushion sank toward her, and then Paula arrived, and everyone had to squeeze together to make room. Finally, the 4 of them were seated properly, with Lily's right leg and hip and shoulder pressing close against Kath's warm left side. Lily sipped her drink. It was sugary and sweet, and filled with bits of canned pineapple and mandarin oranges. One of the women in Levi's sat down in the Chinese chair next to the end of the sofa near Lily. She was dressed like Marlon Brando in The Wild One, with a leather jacket and thick-soled black boots, and her short dark hair was combed into a pompadour, shiny with pomade. She had a round face and brown eyes, and she gave Lily and Kath a frankly curious look, and said, "You 2 are new, aren't you? I'm Sal." Lily and Kath clinked their glasses with hers. "Lily." "Kath." "Did you come from the club?" Sal asked. "How was the show tonight? I missed it." They talked about the Telegraph Club for a few minutes, or Kath and Sal did, while Lily sipped her drink and tried to pretend as if she went to these sorts of parties all the time. Over in the corner by the record player, she saw 2 women laughing. One woman's arms looped around the other's neck as if they were about to start dancing. "We don't see many Orientals around here," Sal said to Lily. "Do you speak English? Where are you from?" Lily stiffened. "Chinatown. I was born here." Sal looked impressed. "You don't even have an accent. That's amazing." "I was born here," Lily said again, a bit more sharply. "I thought all the Orientals in Chinatown only spoke Chinese." "No." She hoped that her short tone would make Sal drop it. "Hey, Patsy!" Sal called across the room. "There's an Oriental over here. Where'd you meet that other one? Over at Blanco's?" Lily was grateful for the sofa then, for allowing her to sink back. If only she could sink through it to the other side, where it would hide her from their scrutiny. Patsy turned out to be a redhead in a red and white checked dress that reminded Lily of a picnic blanket. She came over and perched on the arm of Sal's chair, while Sal's arms snaked around her small waist.
"Hello, I'm Patsy,"
she said, extending her hand. Lily sat up with some effort and shook Patsy's hand reluctantly.
Where was that? Sal continued. Blanco's? Is that where you saw that girl?
Patsy leaned against Sal's shoulder.
I've never been to Blanco's. That place is for Filipino dykes. What do I look like?
Sal laughed and squeezed Patsy's waist, causing her to squeal.
Where was it then? I swear it was recent. You said there were gay girls there.
The Forbidden City, Patsy said promptly. Have you ever been there, hon?
She looked at Lily. No, Lily said again. There was a commotion over in the dining room, and a moment later Tommy entered the living room with a martini in one hand, scanning the faces as if she were searching for someone. Tommy had taken off her tuxedo and put on gray flannel pants and a blue-collared shirt with the top button undone. Of course, Lily realized, the tuxedo was a costume, and now Tommy was at home. And yet she still carried herself the same way, as if her onstage persona was barely more than a gloss over her real life. Sal yelled, "Terry! Over here!" Lily didn't know who Terry was, but when Tommy saw Sal, she came over to join them, pulling over the other Chinese chair. Patsy smiled at Tommy and lifted her face for a kiss, and Tommy obliged, planting one on her cheek.
You look good, Pat,
Tommy said, and then reached over to shake Sal's hand.
It's been a while. Glad you could make it.
Thanks for the invite, Sal said.
Sorry I can't make it to your show tomorrow night. My budget's kind of tight.
Tommy shrugged and sat down, placing her martini glass on the coffee table. She pulled out a pack of cigarettes and lit one.
So's mine. You could make some extra bucks with those fans of yours,
Sal said, grinning.
Remember that dame who followed you up to your dressing room?
Tommy looked bitter.
If she figured out I'm actually a woman, she would have called the cops.
She shook her head.
How are things with you? Good. We were just talking about the Forbidden City, since you have an Oriental guest here.
Sinking through the couch wasn't enough, Lily thought. She wished she could sink all the way through to China. At least then she'd blend in. Tommy's eyes flickered from Sal to Lily.
Yeah, the China doll's been to my show a few times. You like it, sweetheart?
Lily's face burned, and she felt Kath tense up beside her. Of course, she forced herself to say politely, reminding herself she was Tommy's guest. It's wonderful. Tommy grinned.
Wonderful.
She sat back, crossing her legs, and took a deep drag on her cigarette.
You know, I heard the Forbidden City had a male impersonator once.
Really? Lily said warily, but she was interested in spite of her discomfort. When?
A few years back,
Tommy said.
Maybe during the war? I can't remember. It was before my time. But I've heard about her. She did herself up in a suit, like Marlene Dietrich, Gladys Bentley. Not exactly the same as my gig, but I wonder what happened to her. I heard she was good.
The praise, delivered in such an offhanded tone, curled through Lily as if Tommy had offered her a personal compliment. She couldn't imagine a Chinese woman putting on a show like Tommy's, but she was immediately proud of her. She wanted to ask more about her, but Lana came into the living room looking for Tommy.
There you are. You slipped right past me,
Lana said.
Where's the tonic?
Tommy had to get up and go back to the kitchen, and Patsy and Sal sat quietly for a moment, smiling fixedly at Lily and Kath, before Patsy got up and took the chair that Tommy had vacated. Lily raised her glass to her mouth and realized, to her surprise, that she had finished her drink. Let me get you another, Kath said. I don't need another, Lily said, but Kath didn't appear to hear her. She stood up abruptly, causing the sofa cushion to heave like a wave, and took both of their glasses, Kath's was empty too, off to the kitchen. Lily felt the distinct absence of Kath next to her, as if part of her own body was suddenly missing.
How long have you two been an item?
Patsy asked after Kath left the living room. Lily was taken aback.
Me and Kath? We're not.
Patsy gave her a hint of a knowing smile.
Oh, my mistake.
Embarrassed, Lily glanced around for something to distract her and caught sight of the couple by the record player again, still gazing into each other's eyes, and another couple beyond them sharing a single chair while they sorted through records. The room was full of couples, Lily realized. How naive had she been to not notice this until now? No wonder Patsy thought that she and Kath were.
She dropped her gaze to her lap, stunned. Perhaps Patsy had seen something in her and Kath, just as Lily had seen the other pairs and known they were not simply friends. The thought made Lily's heart race. Someone put Shake, Rattle, and Roll on the record player, and Patsy jumped up, declaring,
"I love this one. Come on, Sal, dance with me."
Sal objected for a second, but it was obvious she wanted to say yes, and she allowed Patsy to drag her into the small empty space between the coffee table and the kitchen door, where they began to dance. A moment later, Claire and Paula got up from the couch to join them, leaving Lily alone at last. How long have you two been an item? Her face was burning. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Paula's hands on Claire's waist, Claire's fingers sliding down Paula's arms, laughing at each other as they swiveled their hips in time to the music. She saw Patsy in Sal's arms. She saw Sal spin Patsy away from her and back again, her skirt flaring out. She had never seen two women dance together like that before, as if they were a man and a woman. And then Kath appeared in the doorway behind the dancing couples, holding 2 more glasses of sangria. And though Lily didn't allow herself to meet Kath's eyes, she was sharply aware of her approach. There was more room on the sofa with Claire and Paula gone, so Kath didn't need to sit so close to her now. She took a seat about a foot away and handed Lily her sangria. The cushion sagged under her weight, and Lily braced herself so that she didn't slide toward Kath as she took the wine glass. Patsy's question rang in her head, like someone pressing a doorbell over and over again. How long? Lily felt as if she should say something to Kath, but everything she could say or do now seemed impossibly weighted. Her head was fuzzy. She was a muddy mess of panic and wonder. The sofa felt like a trap. She had to escape. "I have to find the bathroom," Lily said abruptly. She set her sangria glass down on the coffee table and lurched to her feet. The room seemed to shift beneath her. "Are you all right?" Kath asked, reaching out to steady her. She felt Kath's fingers brush her arm, and she pulled away skittishly. "I'm fine," she said, and hurried out of the living room, narrowly missing Paula's elbow as she swung Claire around. The kitchen was filled with people she didn't know, and she couldn't see Lana or Tommy anywhere. "Where's the bathroom?" she asked one of the women, who pointed to an open doorway at the back of the kitchen. She stepped through into a dim, empty hallway, where she saw a door with a crack of light beneath it that she assumed was the bathroom. When she knocked, someone called, "Just a minute!" Lily stepped back to lean against the wall. The sound of the record player and the laughter from the living room was muffled here, and the dimness made her feel invisible at last. The hallway continued on a short distance to her right, where another door was halfway open. A soft golden light spilled from the room, and she saw a pair of black Oxfords abandoned on the floor in front of a dresser. It was only a few more steps to the end of the hall, and she didn't have to enter the room to look inside. There was a double bed, covered by a nubbly green blanket, and a nightstand with a yellow lamp. Beside the dresser was a half-open closet door. Tommy's tuxedo hung on a hanger hooked over the edge. Inside the closet, more suits nestled right next to several dresses. Lana's clothes. On top of the dresser, a handled metal tray contained an assortment of cosmetics, and a couple of black bow ties lay limply beside it. From what Lily could tell, this was the only bedroom in the apartment, and Lana and Tommy shared it. She glanced over her shoulder at the bathroom door, but it was still closed. She took a shallow breath and stepped into the room. She was acutely conscious of the double bed behind her as she moved toward the dresser. Behind the satin bow ties, propped against the speckled mirror, was an old-fashioned sepia-toned postcard of a man in a tuxedo. She leaned closer. No, the person was identified as Miss Vesta Tilley. She wore a top hat and held a cigarette between her lips, and she had a mischievous light in her eyes. Lily reached out to pick up the postcard, but before she touched it, a door creaked and there was a light step on the wooden floor.
"Hello there."
Lily spun around to face the door, and there was Tommy, hands in her pockets, studying her.
"I'm sorry, I didn't mean—"
Tommy came into the room.
"Looking for the bathroom? It's down the hall."
"Yes, I was. I'm sorry."
She started for the door, But Tommy was in her way and she didn't move, and Lily had to stop. Tommy looked amused at first, and then her amusement turned into something more like curiosity.
How old are you?
Tommy asked. Lily trembled.
18?
Tommy came toward her. It was only a few steps. The room wasn't very large, and now Lily smelled her cologne again, and her stomach clenched as if in anticipation or in fear. She wasn't sure which. Tommy smiled at her gently, the kind of smile one gave to calm a nervous child, perhaps, and said,
18 going on 16, I think.
Tommy closed the distance between them and lifted her hand to Lily's face, cupping her cheek in her palm, turning her face up to hers. All of her senses rushed to that tender spot where Tommy's warm hand was touching her, her fingertips softly pressing against her neck, her thumb running lightly but deliberately over her mouth.
Sweet 16.
There was a honeyed tone to Tommy's voice, a low dip to it that sounded like a secret. Lily felt as if Tommy was on stage again. Her voice and her touch and the way she was looking at Lily, a performance that she had slipped into effortlessly, like water. For a moment, an excruciatingly long moment, Lily was sure that Tommy was thinking about kissing her. Silky heat ran through her like a river. She swayed on her feet, as if she were standing on the deck of a ferry in the bay, and Tommy gave a brief, breathy laugh.
You're drunk, sweetheart.
No, she whispered. Tommy's finger still nudged against her lips.
Yes.
Tommy withdrew her hand almost reluctantly.
I'm not 16.
Lily felt, dazedly, as if she had to make that clear.
You sure?
Tommy smiled a little, almost flirtatiously.
You shouldn't be in here, doll,
she said gently.
You better go back to your girlfriend.
Lily felt as if she were sinking, as if the floor were tilting dangerously. But even in her state, Lily knew who Tommy meant.
We're not,
Lily said, and immediately felt as if she had betrayed Kath. Tommy raised her eyebrows.
Does she know that, sweetheart?
She stepped toward the door and made a flourish as if to show Lily out of the room.
After you.
Chapter 32. Kath was still sitting on the sofa. She was holding a wine glass half full of sangria in one hand, the other hand resting on her thigh, her fingers loosely curled up as if something had recently been pulled out of her grasp and she hadn't yet noticed. When Lily saw her, she felt a fresh pang of embarrassment. She had been so stupid. If she had been so obvious to everyone else, Kath must surely know, and she had never said a thing. That could only mean that Kath didn't. She couldn't even think it. She had to leave. She needed to go home. Lily began to skirt the edge of the living room, going around the dancing couples, and caught Kath's eye on the way. Kath rose from the couch immediately, nearly spilling her drink. She righted it just in time and set it on the table, heading toward Lily to meet her at the bench where everyone's coats made a multicolored pile.
What's wrong?
Kath asked.
I have to go,
Lily said at the same time.
Did something happen? I just need to go home, Lily insisted. She glanced down at her wristwatch, which enabled her to look away from Kath. It's 3 o'clock already.
All right, I'll go with you.
You don't have to.
You can't walk back alone.
I don't want you to go out of your way.
It's not.
You really don't have to bother,
Lily said as she dug through the coats.
Are you sure you're all right?
One of the coats, a blue wool peacoat, tumbled to the floor, and several others cascaded down after it.
I'm fine,
Lily said, bending over to grab the fallen coats. She was mortified by her encounter with Tommy, but she wasn't about to tell anyone what had happened, especially not Kath.
If you want to come with me, then come with me. I just can't stay here anymore.
It was awkward after that, but Kath wouldn't let her walk home alone. Kath helped her find their coats, which were near the bottom, and when Lily dislodged hers at last, an envelope fluttered down to the floor. She bent over to pick it up. It was addressed to someone named Teresa Scafani. She shoved it back into the pile. Kath had pulled Lana away from a group of dancers to say goodnight. Lily wished she hadn't done that, but now here she was, beaming at them with her face flushed from dancing.
"Thank you for coming,"
Lana said, and reached out and took Lily's hand in hers.
"Thank you for inviting me, us,"
Lily said.
"You'll be safe heading home?"
Yes, we'll go together,
Kath said.
"Good. Be careful, girls."
As Lana went back to the dancing, Lily saw Tommy emerge from the kitchen, a cigarette in her mouth and a cocktail glass in one hand. Tommy's eyes met Lily's, and a little smile passed over Tommy's face, that same flirtatious smile from the bedroom, and Lily turned away and headed for the door. She went so quickly that Kath had to rush after her. "What's gotten into you?" she asked as Lily plunged out onto the street.
I'm just tired.
Lily crossed her arms against the foggy chill and began to walk away from Lana and Tommy's building. Kath tugged at her elbow. "That's the wrong way." Lily stopped and looked up. She was walking directly toward Coit Tower, which was still illuminated in the dark. She glanced around in confusion and realized she had no idea where she was. "It's this way." Kath gestured in the opposite direction. They went back past Lana and Tommy's building. The living room window was curtained, but through the cracks Lily saw light and movement, and the faint sound of music leaked out into the night. At the end of the block, Lily saw the street sign, Castle Street, right before they turned steeply downhill. They hadn't gone much farther before Kath reached for her arm and said, "Wait, wait." Lily felt Kath's hand slide down her arm and lodge around her wrist, then around her fingers, pulling her to a halt. "What happened?" Kath asked. "I know something happened." The streetlight was behind Kath, so Lily couldn't see her face clearly, but she could hear the concern in her voice, and beneath that, the hurt that Lily wouldn't tell her what it was. Lily wasn't sure she understood it herself, this combination of burning embarrassment and outright fear. Those strange women at the party seemed to see her much more clearly than she saw herself, and it was disorienting, as if her body were not her own, but capable of acting without the conscious direction of her mind, which was screaming at her to let go of Kath's hand, to go home as fast as she could, to crawl into her bed and pull the covers over her head and forget about this entire night. Forget about Tommy Andrews and the Telegraph Club, and all those women who looked at her and saw that she and Kath were... What? "Did Tommy do something?" Kath asked, her voice hardening.
"She thinks I'm a child,"
Lily said, the words bursting from her mouth before she could stop them. Tears sprang to her eyes.
"I'm so stupid."
"No," Kath said, stepping closer to her, still holding Lily's hand. "You're not stupid. Do you have feelings for her?" Kath whispered.
"For Tommy?"
Lily wanted to laugh, but she had started to cry, and her laughter came out of her in a choked sob.
"No, I have feelings for you."
Her words came out too loud. They seemed to reverberate in the empty street, and she forced her voice into a whisper as she said,
"Everybody can tell. Even Tommy. I'm so stupid. So stupid."
Kath exhaled in a startled burst.
"I have to go home,"
Lily insisted, trying to pull away, but Kath wouldn't let her go. "Wait," Kath said. "Please." She glanced around nervously. The steep street was deserted, but the lights and noises of the city seemed to rise up in warning. A car engine rumbled and street lights flickered, and down the block a lamp burned in a bay window. Kath pulled Lily toward the edge of the sidewalk and into the shadow of a building. There was a narrow opening there, an alleyway, and Kath tugged her inside, past the reach of light from the main street. The buildings on either side shot up several stories toward the night sky, their windows all black. All sound seemed to be swallowed up here, leaving the two of them in a velvety, dark quiet. "I wasn't sure you felt that way," Kath said, and came closer to Lily. "I mean, I hoped." Lily's heart raced at that word and what it implied.
"Really?"
Her embarrassment at her own obliviousness was abruptly replaced by astonishment. It made her reel. The speed of this, the way her feelings rushed in, pushing one emotion out and shoving in another.
I thought you were just being nice to me. I mean, you can't possibly. I'm so stupid. Don't you want someone like Rhonda?
Rhonda? Kath sounded dumbfounded. No. Why would you think that?
I don't know. Because at least she knows things. I don't understand the way this works.
Kath let out another breath, a hint of laughter. I don't either. I just know. She didn't finish her sentence, but she took another step toward Lily, closing the space between them. Lily could feel the warmth of Kath's body radiating off her, could smell the traces of cigarette smoke and beer on her breath, along with a new fragrance she didn't recognize, something clean and bright. It made Lily's skin tingle. Lily, Kath said softly. Don't say anything, Lily whispered. She felt as if speaking would ruin everything. Then they'd have to put a name to this feeling between them, this rapidly growing heat and longing that made the sliver of air between their bodies charged with electricity. She could swear she felt the air humming. She had never noticed before that she and Kath were the same height. If she leaned forward just a little bit, her nose would graze Kath's. And then they were touching noses gently, practically nuzzling each other. And it was funny and startling, and Lily giggled nervously while Kath let go of her hand, and, deliberately, touched Lily's waist. The feel of Kath's hands sliding around her body silenced her laughter. She stopped breathing, and Kath's mouth touched hers, feeling its way in the dark. Her lips were cool and dry at first, but quickly, so quickly, they bloomed into warmth and softness. Her body was close against hers, the shape of her like a shock. Her breasts and her hips and her hip bones against her, her hands pulling her closer, closer. Lily had not known, had never imagined how a first kiss could turn so swiftly into a second, and a third, and then a continual opening and pressing and touching, the tip of her tongue against Kath's, the warmth of her mouth and the way that warmth reached all the way through her body and raised an indescribable ache between her legs. She had to push herself closer to Kath. That was the only thought in her mind. She put her hands on Kath and slid them beneath her jacket and clutched her back, and there was an awkward fumbling as they moved in the dark alleyway together, seeking something to press against, until the wall of the building was at Lily's back, and she could pull Kath into her. She didn't know how long they kissed. Not long enough. But at one point Kath drew back to take a breath, and Lily opened her eyes and saw to her right the dim glow of the street beyond their dark alley. She realized with a start what she was doing and where she was doing it and whom she was doing it with, and she knew she should feel ashamed. But all she felt was the heaving of Kath's chest against hers, and the tenderness of her lips where Kath had kissed her. Chapter 33.
I don't know why you're bothering with an evening gown at all, Lily said, flipping through an issue of 17. The competition only requires a cheongsam. When will you even have time to change?
She, Shirley, and Flora were gathered around the table at the back of Flora's father's shop, waiting for Mary, who was late. They were supposed to go to Union Square to shop for Shirley's dress for Miss Chinatown, and Lily did not want to go. She wished she was with Kath instead, and if that wasn't possible, she'd rather shut herself in her bedroom alone. And remember, the sensation of Kath's mouth against hers, her hands on her waist.
It's so that I stand out, Shirley said. I'm not going to give my speech in a cheongsam. I'll wear that for the main portion of the pageant, but I don't want to be like the other girls during the speech part. I want to show that I'm American, too.
Lily was only half listening. She had landed on a column at the front of the magazine titled, A Look at Tomorrow, The Challenge of the Planets. To her surprise, it was written by Arthur C. Clarke and was about the problems of outer space travel.
Give me that,
Flora said, reaching for the magazine.
Wait, I'm reading.
Flora gave Lily a reproachful look. Lily thought Flora hadn't yet accepted that Shirley had welcomed her back into their group of friends, and pulled the magazine out of Lily's hands, flipping to a story on evening gowns.
This would be beautiful on you, Flora said, pointing to the photograph of a white tulle ball gown.
Shirley frowned at the small print.
Why does it cost so much? We can alter something to look like that,
Flora assured her.
Where's Mary?
Shirley wondered, glancing toward the front of the shop.
We can't go without her. She knows about tailoring.
I'll go see if she's coming, Lily volunteered. She left the back room and went out into the main shop area, passing shelves displaying vases and statues, blue and white porcelain and boxes of silk fans. There were a few customers in the store, but it was still relatively early on Sunday, and so it was mostly empty. She opened the front door and peered out into the rainy morning, hoping to see Mary coming down the sidewalk, but she didn't see her. Reluctantly, she went back inside, but rather than rejoining Shirley and Flora, she wandered through the aisles of the store, delaying the moment when she'd be forced to have constructive opinions, again, on dresses. Flora's father's shop held an assortment of art pieces and tourist tchotchkes. There was always something funny or interesting to discover. When she had been younger, at Christmas time he would allow her to pick out a small toy from a display in the back, and now she found herself winding her way to that same corner. The rotating rack was still there, and Lily spun it slowly, examining the toys. There were matchbox-sized cars painted garishly red and yellow, and baby dolls with eyes that rolled open when they were picked up. There were small boxes of jacks and dice that rattled when she handled them, and a row of green toy soldiers. And on the bottom shelf of the last side of the rack was a row of miniature jet airplanes with plastic cockpit bubbles through which the helmeted heads of tiny pilots were visible. Lily picked one up, delighted. The plane was painted silver and white, with the United States flag on the tail, and black wheels that really spun were attached to the bottom. The toy planes made her think of Kath. It had been 3 days, well, 3 mornings, since they had parted on the dark corner of Columbus and Broadway. They had hugged each other quickly, and Lily realized then and there that they'd never be able to kiss goodbye in public. A tightening in her chest as she reluctantly turned away. They hadn't seen or telephoned each other since then, but that wasn't unusual. Lily still didn't know Kath's address or phone number. They only saw each other at school, or on the nights they went to the Telegraph Club. In retrospect, it seemed so obvious that their friendship had always carried the added weight of something that neither of them was equipped to address openly. It was easier and safer to pretend that their friendship was merely a casual one. But the time for pretending was over, and Lily was painfully aware of the responsibility that came with admitting how they felt about each other. It was risky to share this secret. Lily turned the airplane over in her hands. On the bottom of the plane, a sticker read, "Made in Japan." She ran the edge of her fingernail beneath it, and it lifted off so easily, as if it had barely been there to begin with. But a sticky residue remained, a trace of the plane's hidden origin. She heard Shirley and Flora break into laughter at the back of the shop. She put the airplane back on the shelf and went to rejoin her friends, walking past an American woman in a camel-colored coat who was examining a display of marked-down jade figurines.
"Excuse me," the woman said. "Can you help me with these?"
"I don't work here," Lily said. The woman was middle-aged and wore horn-rimmed glasses through which she gazed short-temperedly at Lily.
"Can you find someone who does?"
Taken aback, Lily said, "Of course." She went to find Flora's father, who was behind the jewelry case on the other side of the store, taking an inventory of unsold Christmas items.
"Mr. Sue, there's a lady over there who wants someone to help her," Lily said.
Mr. Sue looked over the top of his black-framed glasses at Lily.
"Where?"
She pointed, and he huffed and went off to find her. Lily paused for a moment in front of the Christmas leftovers, her gaze drawn to the wall behind the jewelry case. It was a notice board where advertisements for Chinatown events were posted. A hodgepodge of Cathay Orchestra concerts and YWCA charity raffles and Christmas potlucks for the needy. On the right side was a poster that Lily couldn't remember seeing before, emblazoned with a large dark headline, "Pledge of Loyalty." She went around the jewelry counter so she could read what was printed below. 1. We, Chinese-American citizens, pledge our loyalty to the United States. 2. We support the nationalist government of Free China and her great leader, President Chiang Kai-shek. 3. We support the United Nations Charter and the efforts made by the United Nations troops who are fighting for a united, free, and independent Korea. 4. The Chinese Communists are the stooges of Soviet Russia. Those who are invading Korea are the Chinese Communists, not the Chinese, peace-loving people of Free China. The paper was slightly yellowed, and by the thumbtack holes in it, Lily realized it must have been hanging there for some time, hidden beneath other posters. The bottom third of it was mostly obscured by an ad for a New Year's Eve concert. Curious, she unpinned the concert ad, and beneath it she read, "Pledged by patriotic members of the Chinese YMCA and YWCA, 1951. She had been in junior high school then. It was only a few years ago, but it felt much longer, as if she had been an entirely different person than she was now. She barely knew Kath then, and only as one of the few girls in her math class. She hadn't yet secretly skimmed that book in the back of Thrifty Drugs. She hadn't yet gone to the Telegraph Club or Lana and Tommy's apartment, or stopped on the way home in a dark alley and kissed a girl. The way her body had fit against Kath's, the exquisite ache it had caused. Behind her, the shop door opened, the bell jingling, and she heard Mary's voice.
"Shirley, I'm sorry I'm late."
Lily spun around, irrationally certain that someone had read her mind. But she was quite alone. There was Mary hurrying through the store, her hair wind-blown and the umbrella she was carrying damp from rain. And there were Shirley and Flora emerging from the back room, pulling on their coats. Lily had to force herself to go meet them, tamping down the hot, panicky feeling that bubbled inside her, as if something sordid might spill out of her against her will.
"What took you so long?"
Shirley asked Mary.
"My brother was sick this morning, and my parents— forget about it,"
Mary said.
"Let's just go."
Chapter 34. Shirley pulled a dress out from an overstuffed rack in the juniors section of Macy's bargain basement.
"This is the one,"
she declared. Lily came over from the rack nearby as Shirley held it against herself.
"What do you think?"
It was 2 pieces instead of 1. A pale blue halter-neck blouse tucked into a matching full skirt and accented by a wide darker blue belt. "It's pretty," Lily said, "but I thought you wanted a strapless dress." Flora came over with an armful of wraps.
"You have to try it on. It's very Hollywood."
Shirley glanced around.
"It's my size. Where are the dressing rooms?"
The vast windowless space was crowded with bargain hunters drifting from giant bins of marked-down sweaters to spinning racks of dresses in odd sizes. Lily couldn't see the dressing rooms anywhere, but she did see a Macy's employee folding blouses at one of the nearby bins. Shirley saw her too, and said,
"Lily, will you go ask that woman?"
Lily knew Shirley was sending her because she didn't want to go herself and risk facing an unfriendly salesgirl. They often seemed to doubt that any Chinese had the money to pay. Lily didn't want to go either, but she wanted to argue with Shirley even less, so she straightened her shoulders and approached the woman. "Excuse me, miss, where are the dressing rooms?" Lily asked politely. The woman turned toward her. "They're on the far side. Let me take you." Lily froze in surprise, because it was Paula. Not Paula the way she had looked at the Telegraph Club, in her blazer and slacks, but Paula nonetheless. Her short hair was done in a feminine style now, and she wore a tan shirt dress along with her Macy's smock and identifying name tag, which read Miss Webster. Lily knew that Paula recognized her too, because she saw it in Paula's slight widening of her eyes, which was followed almost instantly by a shuddering of her expression, as if she had drawn on a mask. The idea that Paula from the Telegraph Club had a job as a Macy's salesgirl was astonishing. Was Lily supposed to acknowledge that she knew Paula? And if she did, would Paula acknowledge that she knew Lily? Lily was immediately certain that it was dangerous for them to do so. The midnight world in which they had met did not belong here in the brightly lit public afternoon. She and Paula looked at each other for what felt like a very long moment, but was probably no more than a few seconds. Then Paula dropped her gaze to the blouse she was folding and said formally, "Let me take you to the dressing room." "It's not for me. It's for—" Lily gestured to Shirley, who was still standing behind her at the rack with Mary and Flora. Paula nodded. She finished folding the blouse and headed over to Shirley, not even looking at Lily. "Do you need a dressing room, miss?"
"Yes," Shirley said. "Where is it?"
"Please follow me," Paula said. Shirley, Flora, and Mary followed Paula across the floor, and Lily trailed after them nervously. She began to worry that Paula would say something, that she would ask about Kath or why they had left the party so abruptly. She hung back a little when they reached the dressing room, allowing her friends to go in ahead of her. It wasn't as nice as the dressing room in the junior miss department. This one had no carpet on the floor, and the mirrors were smaller and chipped in the corners. "May I help you with anything else?" Paula asked, after Shirley had been installed in her small dressing room.
"No, thank you,"
Shirley said. She caught sight of Lily standing outside, behind Paula, and added,
"Lily, come in with us. I need all of your advice on this."
Paula silently stepped aside for her, and in that moment, Lily understood that Paula wasn't going to say anything to suggest that she knew her, and Lily wasn't going to say anything either. The invisible walls of their two different worlds would slide right back in place, and they would return to their separate lives without comment. As Lily squeezed into the dressing room, she saw Paula escaping back into the bargain basement without a backward glance. The encounter had left Lily feeling uncomfortably vulnerable, as if her most intimate secrets could be exposed at any moment, and the tiny room provided nowhere to hide. The four of them barely fit inside, and Lily had to stand with her back against the door. Shirley was undressing and handing each article of her clothing to Flora to hold carefully. It was Mary's job, apparently, to help Shirley put on the dresses, which meant Lily didn't know why she was there at all, because the only thing she could do was watch. She and Shirley had undressed in front of each other countless times before in changing rooms or bedrooms, and there had never been anything lewd about it. Lily had sometimes been self-conscious about her body, but Shirley had always been very matter-of-fact, openly comparing their measurements as they grew up and excitedly sharing every new development with Lily. The first bra she bought, the first period she got. In fact, the first time Lily got her period, over a year after Shirley started, she'd asked Shirley how to use a sanitary napkin. Her mother had given her the supplies, but Lily hadn't understood her instructions, and it was less embarrassing to ask Shirley how to manage the pins and gauze and belt. Shirley had knelt before her on the floor of her bathroom and practically put her hand between Lily's legs to show her. It had been awkward, but also exciting, because it meant that Lily had finally caught up with her friend. All of this meant that Lily shouldn't be self-conscious to see Shirley undressed. She knew what Shirley's body looked like, and it didn't attract her. But now she was aware of bodies, their physicality, their possibility, in a way she hadn't been before. Kath's body pressed against her, taut and soft all at once. She couldn't look at Shirley until she had the dress on, and then she couldn't help but notice the soft rise of Shirley's breasts over the cups of the bodice, the way they shifted when she twisted back and forth, trying to see every angle in the mirror. The back of the dress dipped low, revealing Shirley's bra. She'd have to get a different one if she wore that dress. It also revealed the naked expanse of her back, the bones of her spine like a map for someone's fingers. The feel of Kath's back beneath her hands, through the fabric of her shirt. How she'd wanted to touch her bare skin.
"I don't know about this one,"
Shirley was saying.
"I think it's a little too flashy, you know?"
Mary giggled, and Flora did too.
"What do you think, Lily?"
Shirley asked. Lily swallowed. "You're probably right. Maybe try the two-piece one?" Shirley nodded.
"Yes. Mary, can you help me out of this?"
And then the dress was coming off again as she raised her arms and Mary pulled it up over her head. Lily dropped her eyes to the floor, where she saw Shirley's stockinged feet on the ground. The black seams had twisted off the center of her calves, but she did not volunteer to help straighten them. Walking home from Union Square later that day, Lily wondered if she'd run into Paula again, or maybe Claire, or even Sal. She realized, with a jolt, that the city must be peppered with women who frequented the Telegraph or similar clubs.
Women who watched performers like Tommy Andrews, made friends with each other, made girlfriends of each other. At each intersection, she cast skittish glances at the women waiting for the light to change, wondering if she was one of them too. Or her. Or her.
Chapter 35. Finally, it was the first Monday back at school after Christmas break. Lily had been inordinately nervous about seeing Kath again, but when the moment arrived, there she was, standing at her locker in an ordinary-looking skirt and blouse. It was disappointingly anticlimactic. The hallway was full of rushing students and teachers, and the fluorescent lights shined bright overhead, erasing the tiniest possibility of romance. Then Kath met her eyes from 10 feet away, and a blush colored her face, and Lily's skin went hot as she remembered the way Kath had held her in the shadows of that alley. They couldn't talk about it in school, of course, except in the most coded of ways. When Kath greeted her, she asked, "Are you all right?" There were 1,000 questions hidden within those words. Lily clutched her books close to her chest as if to cage herself behind them, and answered, "Yes, I'm fine. How are you?" A smile flickered onto Kath's face, and her eyes darted behind Lily for a moment. Lily knew that Shirley was back there somewhere, and Kath seemed to swallow her smile before she said somewhat formally, "I'm fine also." They had to separate then. "I'll see you in class," Lily said. Kath nodded, and at the last possible moment, she turned away. After school, they walked home together, but it was nothing like the way it used to be. Lily was extraordinarily conscious of every time they touched, Kath's elbow brushing hers as they left Galileo, the back of Lily's hand grazing Kath's hip when they stopped at an intersection. She was even more aware of the undulating space between them, like an invisible barrier that could not be crossed. Not in public. "I can't stop thinking about it," Lily said nervously. "About what happened." Kath glanced at her shyly. "I can't either. I can't stop thinking about you." Lily glanced around to double-check that no one was in hearing range. How long have you known about the way you are?" "I don't know. I guess I've always known I was different. It didn't seem like a surprise when I figured it out." They crossed Polk Street on Chestnut, heading for the stairs up Russian Hill. It was cold today. The air was damp and the wind constantly tugged at Lily's hair. "What about you?" Kath asked. "How long have you known?" "I'm not sure. Maybe a long time in some ways, but not very long for real. Not until you." Lily glanced sidelong at Kath. "I'm glad I could help," she said, smiling. Lily laughed, and then shivered. She wasn't sure if it was the wind or Kath's smile that did it. "Do you remember that day in senior goals when you said it wasn't strange that I wanted to go to the moon?" "I remember." "I think that was the first day I really noticed you." "Took you that long?" Kath teased her. "Maybe I'm a late bloomer," Lily said tartly. "Why? When did you notice me?" Kath shot her a grin. "You really want to know?" "Yes." "Well, last year you helped me with a geometry proof. You probably don't remember. You do this thing where you..." Kath trailed off, looking a little shy. "What? What do I do?" "You chew on your lip when you do a difficult math problem," Kath said. "It's cute." Lily's face went red, and she laughed. "I'd better stop that in college, or no one will take me seriously." When they reached the stairs, they started up side by side, and sometimes as they climbed, they bumped against each other, accidentally on purpose. Lily's arm against Kath's, their hands knocking gently together, their fingers almost linking. Right before they reached the top, Kath said very softly, "I want to kiss you again." A jolt went through Lily. She had to stop to catch her breath, and Kath stopped too, and they turned to look at each other. The wind had gone still, and Kath's hair was blown sideways across her forehead as if someone had tousled it with their fingers. Lily could look at Kath forever, but looking was not enough.
She wanted nothing more than to touch Kath, but the space between them seemed to buzz warningly. They were on top of Russian Hill now, on top of the city itself, completely exposed. "Where?" Lily asked. "Where can we go?" The last stall in the girls' bathroom on the second floor had a full-length door, but every girl knew about it and tried to use that stall when she was on her period. There was a shadowy corner under the stairs to the gym by the locker rooms, but anyone could walk past and see them. And then Lily remembered the home economics storage closet on the third floor, which had a key that Lily knew about from her time on the dance committee. Several days passed before Lily was able to get the key. Preparations for the Miss Chinatown contest were ramping up. There were barely 3 weeks to go. And after school, Lily had to help sell raffle tickets at the Chinese hospital, or at Flora's father's store, or at the Eastern Pearl. Figuring out a way to evade Shirley's various demands felt like running an obstacle course, but Lily was afraid to deny her too openly and raise her suspicions. Finally, on Thursday after school, Lily met Kath outside the home economics kitchen, where she pulled the key off the pegboard over the sink and then led the way to the unmarked door down the hall. Lily checked to make sure that the hallway was deserted before she unlocked the closet, and then she and Kath quickly ducked in, pulling the door shut behind them. It was cramped and dusty and hard to see. The only light came from the crack beneath the door, and Lily immediately bumped into a stack of metal bowls that made an awful racket. "Sorry," Lily whispered. "Careful." Kath reached for her hand to pull her away from the bowls, and it was the first time they had really touched since that night in the alley. Lily suddenly felt strangely shy. Kath was so close. She couldn't see much beyond the dim outline of Kath's head and shoulders. The storage closet smelled faintly of pineapple juice, and Lily heard the sounds of the school in the background. Distant doors slammed shut. Voices rose and fell indistinctly. Footsteps came briskly down the hall toward them, and then, thankfully, went past. The closet didn't lock from the inside, of course. Anyone could open the door and find them. She was conscious of her own hand becoming slippery in Kath's. "Are you okay?" Kath whispered. "You seem tense." "No, Tense was not the right word. Terrified, maybe." Almost a week had passed since their first kiss, which had been so surprising that it almost felt accidental. Today was no accident. They had planned to meet here, in this closet, to keep this secret. They knew what could happen if they were discovered. Jean had shown them. For one awful moment, Lily wanted to flee. She could open the door right now. She could say this was all a mistake. She could feel the relief waiting for her out in the hallway, and perhaps Kath sensed this because she asked, "Are you changing your mind?" Her voice was thin and vulnerable, and it made Lily ashamed. "No," she whispered, and she took a step closer to Kath. Her mouth was almost touching her own. She could feel the heat of her breath on her lips. She could smell the fragrance of Kath's skin. It raised goosebumps on her arms. She gently pulled her hand from Kath's and deliberately, lightly, placed her hands around Kath's neck as if they were about to dance. She heard the inhale and exhale of Kath's breath in the darkness, and then Kath slid her hands around Lily's waist and leaned forward to kiss her. It felt different this time. Weighted. They were making this choice together, and Lily felt the seriousness with which Kath touched her. Her mouth questioned her with each kiss. "Is this what you want?" And Lily tried to say yes in the way she pulled Kath close to her, the way she caressed the fine, soft hairs on the nape of Kath's neck, the way she pressed her breasts against Kath's body. Yes. Chapter 36. On Friday, Kath pulled Lily aside after math class, her fingers briefly, electrically curling around Lily's arm. As students rushed past them in the hallway, Kath said, "Miss Wyland is taking the GAA bowling next Wednesday." "You want to go bowling again?" Lily said, surprised. "No, her classroom will be empty." Kath glanced behind Lily and leaned slightly closer so that she could whisper. "Meet me there on Wednesday, 15 minutes after school. The door locks. On Saturday, Shirley called Lily at home.
Are you still going to the hospital to sell raffle tickets today?
Shirley asked.
Yes, why?
Shirley sighed heavily.
You don't need to bother. One of the other Miss Chinatown contestants convinced some of the 6 companies' board members to buy thousands of them all at once. I'm not going to beat her.
What? That's not fair, Lily said.
Flora said I'd win with my speech,
Shirley said gloomily. Lily doubted that, but she wasn't about to make Shirley feel even worse.
It's going to be fine, Lily said, trying to sound positive. I could still go to the hospital. Maybe Papa will help me get the hospital board to buy a bunch.
2,000?
Shirley said doubtfully. Lily winced.
Maybe not that many, but you never know. Do you want to come with me?
No, I can't. Thank you for what you've been doing, really. But I'm not going to win by selling tickets.
After Lily hung up, she lingered for a minute on the landing, wondering whether she should call Kath. Her afternoon was free now that she didn't have to go to the hospital for Shirley. Before she could lose her nerve, she went back to her room to retrieve her math notebook, where Kath had written down her telephone number a few days ago. Lily had done the same in Kath's notebook, but neither of them had called the other yet. She ran back to the telephone and dialed with nervous fingers. Each rotation of the dial seemed to take forever, but at last she heard the call go through and begin to ring. She imagined the telephone in Kath's house coming to life. But it rang, and nobody answered. Finally, Lily hung up.
Who are you calling?
Lily started and turned to face her mother in the kitchen doorway.
Just a friend, Mary,
Lily said, and instantly wished she hadn't said a name.
Are you still going out to sell raffle tickets this afternoon?
Her mother asked. Yes, Lily lied.
Will you stop by DuPont Market for me on your way back? I need some ginger and your father needs more coffee.
Her mother held out a $5 bill, and Lily took it wordlessly. She was afraid her mother would realize somehow that she had lied. But her mother simply went back into the kitchen, leaving Lily standing by the phone. After lunch, Lily walked up Grant Avenue toward North Beach. She turned onto Jackson Street and went into a few of the shops, idly looking through display cases full of cheap jewelry. She had no real plan for the afternoon now that she didn't have to go to the hospital, but she was filled with a restlessness that made her twitchy and anxious. In one store, she found an inexpensive rhinestone comb and impulsively bought it, thinking that she might wear it to the Telegraph Club one night, for Kath to see. The thought lodged in her like a hook, and she began to consider what else she could buy. A new dress, perhaps. New stockings, grown-up ones. A new bra. And that made her imagine Kath seeing it, which made something clutch in her belly. She went north, going into a couple of Chinatown boutiques and finding nothing she liked, and then continued past Broadway, up Columbus and into North Beach. The cafes were lively this afternoon, and as she walked past their big glass windows, she looked inside at couples sipping espressos and nibbling on Italian pastries. Boys and girls, men and women, smiling at each other or talking animatedly, hands touching, unafraid to be seen together. She felt a growling jealousy in the pit of her stomach at the unfairness of it. Before she knew it, she had arrived at Washington Square Park, and she crossed Columbus and stood at the edge of the grass. It was chilly, and not many people were lingering outside. She catalogued them one by one. Caucasian man and woman, 3 Caucasian men, maybe Italian, smoking on a bench, 2 older Negro women walking slowly together, a Chinese girl of about 10 with a woman who was probably her mother, holding her hand. Lily had been hoping she might see Kath, but there was no sign of her. She glanced at her watch. It was time to go to DuPont Market and then home. She turned back toward Chinatown and decided to walk down Powell before cutting across to the grocery store. At the intersection of Powell and Green Street, she stopped to wait for the traffic before crossing, and on the corner diagonal to her, a car pulled up to the sidewalk. The car was familiar, but she wasn't sure why until the passenger door opened and Shirley got out. Lily almost raised her arm to wave at her, but something stopped her. Perhaps the furtive way Shirley was moving, the way she drew her hat down as if to hide her face. But Lily would know Shirley anywhere. She had gone with her to pick out that powder blue coat she wore. It had been her favorite purchase of the last year. Shirley came around to the driver's side of the car, and the window there rolled down, and a man's face appeared in the opening. Lily recognized Calvin Chan with a faint shock. Shirley bent down to Calvin and kissed him. A smile crossed his face, and he reached out of the car and put his hand on her waist, drawing her down for another kiss. The way Calvin touched Shirley, the way they lingered over their kiss, sent a shiver of recognition through Lily. Before she and Kath left the home economics closet, their fingers linked until the last possible moment. When Shirley finally pulled back, she was smiling too. The street was clear by now, but Lily didn't move. She continued to stand on the corner, watching as Shirley waved goodbye to Calvin and hurried down Powell toward Chinatown. Calvin turned his car toward Columbus. Shirley didn't glance back in Lily's direction. She didn't see Lily at all, but Lily saw the jaunty way she walked, head up and shoulders back, carefree. On Monday, Lily watched Shirley closely, but Shirley seemed the same as ever, except with a renewed determination to win the Miss Chinatown contest. She regaled Lily and their friends with her plan to rework her pageant speech, which she would practice at a full dress rehearsal on Friday night. Lily and Kath had plans to go to the Telegraph Club on Friday night, too, but she agreed to the dress rehearsal. It would be over before it was time to meet Kath. On Tuesday, Kath left a note in Lily's locker. They'd begun leaving each other messages after Christmas break, only a few lines long and never signed. Lily knew she should wait to read them in private, but she was always too impatient, and today was no exception. She unfolded it inside her locker, angling the metal door so that she had some privacy. Kath had small, neat handwriting, and the note was short and to the point. "Can't wait till tomorrow." Lily smiled. She pulled out her pencil and wrote beneath it, "Me neither." She folded it back into a neat square, and in math class she slipped it into Kath's hand, her fingers brushing like feathers against Kath's palm. On Wednesday, it rained. All day it tapped against the windows like a drum roll. After school, Lily dawdled at her locker, straightening up her books, putting on and then taking off her coat, glancing impatiently at her watch. Finally, it was time. She walked to Miss Wyland's classroom alone, and when she arrived, it was unlocked and deserted. Rainy afternoon light came through the half-closed blinds, casting pale stripes across the floor. She went to one of the windows and looked out. It had a view of the courtyard. She was there for barely a minute before she heard footsteps, and when she turned around, she saw Kath closing the classroom door. Lily crossed the room and reached for Kath's hand, her pulse already leaping. "Wait," Kath said, and she first locked the door from the inside, and then went across the room to close the blinds. Lily went to help her. When they were finished, the room was almost dark, although the thin rectangular window in the door let in light from the hallway. If anyone stood at that window and peered inside, they'd be able to see most of the classroom. Lily and Kath headed for the farthest corner, which was blocked from the window's view by the tall metal filing cabinet. Above it, Miss Wyland had pinned a travel poster depicting palm trees and a beach, with the words, "Los Angeles," written across the sky. Lily reached for Kath's hand and drew her closer, her heart racing with anticipation. She had to be at Commodore Stockton to meet Frankie in an hour and a half, which gave them barely an hour together. She already felt the minutes ticking by too fast, but part of her realized there was something delicious about prolonging this moment, this intolerable pause before they kissed. Here, everything was possible. In the dim light, Kath's face was all shadows. She was close enough now that Lily could smell the faint trace of mint on her breath, and the light, warm scent of her skin. She brushed her nose against Kath's neck, and she wanted to bottle up the fragrance of her. She felt Kath's pulse beneath her lips, and Kath's hand cupping the back of her head, and at last, Kath's mouth touching hers. It was still a shock to feel it, the connection between their bodies, as if it had risen from the marrow of her bones, thick and charged and sweet. Before she had been afraid of being discovered and afraid of discovering herself. But the more they kissed, the less afraid she felt, until her fear was subsumed beneath much more powerful feelings. She wanted to touch Kat's skin. She tugged the hem of Kat's blouse out from her skirt and slid her hands beneath it. And finally she felt the warm skin of her back, and the quiver of Kat's body as she touched her. Kath drew back briefly and reached for the buttons of Lily's blouse, asking, "Can I?" Lily helped her unbutton it, and then Kath put her hand on the bare skin of Lily's waist, and Lily closed her eyes. Kath's hand slid up over her ribs and cupped the curve of her breast, and her thumb trailed electrically over the outline of Lily's nipple through her bra. And then she pushed her leg between Lily's thighs, and Lily gasped at how it felt, the pressure and the movement there, and it was exactly what she wanted. She was astonished by the way this worked between them so instinctively, as if they had been made to do this together. But Lily felt as if there were no time. She couldn't entirely forget that they only had an hour together. A desire for something more was rising inside her as Kath moved against her, their skirts riding up as their bodies rubbed together. It felt urgent, as if they were counting down the seconds till a bomb would explode. There was no time. They had to do this right now. And she reached for the hem of her skirt and tugged it up to her hips, and she took Kat's hand and moved it to the cleft of her body. Kath hesitated. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "Please," Lily said, overcome. So Kath put her hand between Lily's legs, and Lily helped her, fumbling with her underwear. It was awkward, but when Kath's fingers touched her, they both gasped. "Am I in the right place?" Kath asked. "Yes," Lily whispered. It all felt like the right place. Kath's fingers rubbed, and it was so marvelous, so intoxicating. She'd never even really touched herself like this before, and now she was pinned against the side of the filing cabinet, and it made a dull metallic thud as her hands slapped against it. "I'm sorry," she gasped. But she couldn't really be sorry because it was all happening so quickly, so unexpectedly, and she clutched Kath close to her as the sensations took over, her body shuddering, and she pressed her face into Kath's neck until it was over. There was a minute in which she breathed in and out, and Kath held her gently, her head resting against the filing cabinet. Then Kath kissed her neck and shifted herself over Lily's thigh, and whispered, Is this all right?" "Yes," Lily said, and she leaned into Kath, holding her as she moved, feeling Kath's wetness slide against her leg. It was extraordinary, Lily thought. There was nothing like this in the world. How different this was from when Lily was alone in her room. How different, and how much more. An overflowing amount of more. Kath kept rocking against her thigh, her breath ragged against Lily's cheek, and Lily stroked her hand over Kath's hair tenderly, feeling impossibly close to her. How precious she was. And how miraculous. Chapter 37. All this time, Shirley had said nothing about Calvin. Earlier, Lily might have been resentful or even jealous, but her own secret was much more important now. On Friday night, Lily arrived at the Lums' home to find Shirley and Flora in the living room. Shirley had already put on her Macy's dress, and when Lily entered, Shirley asked,
"Look what I have. Do you like my earrings?" "They're from Mr. Wong's store," Flora said.
Lily took off her coat and came closer to look at the blue drops clipped to Shirley's ears. They looked like sapphires. "Pretty," Lily said.
"They go really well with the dress," Flora said. "What do you think, Lily?" Shirley asked, twirling around. The dress fit her well. She'd selected a gauzy pastel blue gown with a full skirt and a Grecian-style draped neckline. She was wearing white patent leather heels and full makeup, with a crimson mouth and the corners of her eyes emphasized by a sweep of eyeliner, and she'd curled her hair and pinned it in place with a rhinestone comb. "Do I look like a good Chinese girl?" Shirley fluttered her eyelashes. Lily sat down on the sofa and picked her words carefully. "You look like a beauty queen," she said.
Shirley pursed her lips and walked over to the coffee table, where she had left a written draft of her speech.
Well, the judges better think so,
Shirley said.
I know they will,
Flora said. They heard footsteps on the stairs, and a moment later Mary appeared, carrying Shirley's cheongsam in a garment bag.
I'm sorry I'm late,
Mary said, rushing into the living room. She laid the bag over the back of the sofa and unzipped it to display the dress, which her mother, who was a seamstress, had altered for Shirley.
You should try it on to make sure it fits.
The cheongsam was sky blue silk embroidered with white flowers to coordinate with the Macy's dress.
Oh, it's beautiful! But I'm going to give my speech in this dress,
Shirley said, gesturing to the one she was wearing.
Let me practice in this first. Dress rehearsal, and then I'll try on the cheongsam. Here, all of you should sit down and be my audience, and my judges.
Shirley moved the cheongsam over to one of the empty armchairs while Mary joined Lily and Flora on the sofa. Shirley stood across from them, backlit by the windows, and held her speech in both hands as she gave them a bow.
Good evening, gentlemen,
she began. Flora and Mary giggled in response, because of course they weren't gentlemen. Lily managed to smile.
Gong hei fa cui. Thank you for allowing me the honor of speaking to you tonight. I have thought carefully about who Miss Chinatown is meant to be, and I humbly hope that you will find me best suited to the task. One of Miss Chinatown's most important responsibilities is to reign over the New Year festivities as a representative of our community. The New Year festival is an ancient tradition dating back thousands of years, and yet it also celebrates the opportunity to make a new start in the new year. Every year we honor our ancestors and thank them for their blessings. And every year we prepare our homes and families for the new year by paying our debts and cleaning out the dust of the old year. We Chinese Americans have come to this new world of America to make new lives for ourselves and our families. Miss Chinatown should represent the best of both these traditions, ancient and modern. She should honor the strength of the Chinese family and Chinese tradition, but she should also embrace the best of the new American way of life. I am the daughter of hard-working immigrants from Canton. I was born right here in Gaogamsan, and I grew up working in my parents' restaurant, where I saw how Chinese culture can be embraced by Americans. I am a daughter of the old world as well as the new world, and I am ready to represent Chinatown as we move forward into the Year of the Sheep. I humbly present myself to you, honored judges, as an obedient and dutiful daughter of Chinatown. Thank you.
Shirley curtsied, holding her skirt back delicately as if she were a princess, and Lily, Flora, and Mary clapped.
I think that's pretty good, Flora said. Very humble.
And virtuous, Mary said. Lily wasn't sure she liked the speech. It felt like a fraud, as if Shirley were trying to flatter the judges into voting for her.
I like the curtsy at the end, Lily said.
But do you think it's enough to win?
Shirley asked.
I didn't sell enough raffle tickets. You can still win, Flora declared. You're so much prettier than the other girls. I saw the one who sold all those tickets to the 6 companies. She has a face like a cow.
Flora, Mary admonished her. That's mean.
It's true, Flora insisted. If Miss Chinatown is supposed to be a beauty queen, then Shirley should win. What do you think, Lily? Shirley asked. You're so quiet.
There was a subtle challenge in Shirley's tone, and Lily knew she was supposed to say something encouraging, that Shirley was the prettiest of all, that she would surely win, or else those judges were all blind idiots. That was the price of admission to Shirley's circle, and Lily had paid it before. It was easy enough to continue paying it. But she didn't want to anymore. Lily realized she'd stopped wanting to pay her fee a long time ago. All she wanted right now was to get this dress rehearsal over with and go to the Telegraph Club with Kath.
Miss Chinatown is about supporting Chinatown businesses, Lily said finally. The judges don't care how pretty you are. The girls are all pretty enough. They only care how much money you'll bring in. You know how it works.
Flora gasped, and Mary frowned. But Shirley gave Lily a look of grudging respect.
Chapter 38.
When Lily got home after the dress rehearsal, Frankie was sick with a stomachache. As she waited for him to settle down and for her parents to go to bed,
She watched the hands of the clock move toward and past the hour she usually went to meet Kath. By the time the flat was quiet, she knew Kath had left their meeting spot. She hoped Kath had gone ahead to the club to wait for her. Outside, the streets were thick with fog, and she doubled her scarf around her neck. Every headlight, every street lamp had a nimbus around it, an otherworldly glow, and the air itself seemed to press against Lily's body. It clung to her like smoke, like a cloak, making her feel as if she must be invisible. It was as if the city itself were helping to hide her. The Telegraph Club's neon sign shivered in the distance. Music drifted down Broadway. Disconnected laughter floated on the air. She was a ghost gliding through the streets. She was a fish sliding through dark waters. She was at the door of the club, and there was Mickey, who said,
"Your friend's already inside."
"Thank you," Lily said, and stepped through the doorway. The club was warm and loud and smelled as it always did of perfume and cigarettes and beer. Lily heard Tommy crooning through the speakers. The bar area, which she had never walked through alone, was a long line of women turning to look at her. She felt as if she were on display, and part of her wanted to hide, but another part thrilled to it. This being seen, as if every person who gazed at her were creating her anew. She paused in the archway between the bar and the stage room, loosening her scarf in the warm room and scanning the tables for Kath. Every face was turned toward the stage, where Tommy stood spotlighted, singing Secret Love. Like every time before, there were a number of couples, men and women, seated close to the stage, the women somewhere between enthralled and embarrassed, the men wearing knowing smiles. Lily wondered what they thought they knew. She was pretty sure they were wrong. She spotted Kath seated with Jean and Jean's college friends in the leftmost corner, toward the back. Lily might not have seen her at all, because she was largely in shadow, but Kath leaned forward to light a cigarette, and the flare of the lighter drew her attention. The flame briefly illuminated Kath's face. Her hair was swept back and parted on the side, like a man's. It startled Lily to see her like that, and she suddenly felt self-conscious. She was wearing her new dress, the one she told her mother she'd bought to wear to the pageant, but had actually chosen for tonight. It was tighter than the dresses she usually wore, with a lower V-neck than she was used to, although it was still quite modest. But in this room, among these women, her new dress was a declaration. If she went over to Kath and sat beside her, everyone here would know what it meant. Tommy began another number, a lively one that involved her flirting with the women around the edge of the stage. Lily remembered how she had once fantasized about Tommy singing to her at one of those tables, and her fantasy seemed so naive now, so silly, a schoolgirl dream. She recognized the smile on Tommy's face as she leaned down to serenade a brunette in a maroon cocktail dress. She looked so flattered, so eager. Lily looked away. She began to weave her way toward Kath, who seemed to be looking around too. Lily thought she saw Kath put down her cigarette. She thought she saw the slightly paler shadow of her face rise up, as if she were standing. "Excuse me," she whispered, bumping into strangers' chairs, slipping around women standing at the rear of the room. When had the small stage room become so large and filled with so many obstacles? She wasn't even paying attention to Tommy's show anymore. At last she was there, and Lily recognized the set of Kath's shoulders even though she couldn't see her face, which was only a blur in the smoky dimness. "Kath," she whispered in relief. It had only been a few hours since she'd seen Kath at school, but it felt as if days had passed. "What happened?" Kath whispered. "I waited, but then it got too late." Someone nearby shushed them, and Lily grabbed Kath's hand and pulled her back through the stage room and into the hallway that led to the stairs. The alcove beneath the stairs was empty, and Lily drew Kath into its shadows, her skin already flushing with anticipation. "I'm sorry I was late," Lily said. "Frankie was sick and I had to wait till he went to sleep." There were a few beer kegs and some wooden crates stored under the stairs, but there was just enough room for the two of them. Overhead, cracks in the stair treads let in paper-thin shafts of dim yellow light. It slanted over Kath's face as she closed the space between them and said, "I'm glad you're here." And then she kissed Lily. "Me too." Lily kissed her back. When they drew apart, Lily remembered that she had brought a gift for Kath, and she pulled the toy airplane from her pocket. "This is for you," she said. Kath held it up to examine it in better light.
"What's this for?"
She sounded surprised. "It made me think of you." Flora's father had assumed it was for Lily's youngest brother, and she hadn't corrected him. She had wanted to put it in a box and wrap it, but she didn't have the right size box, and the only wrapping paper at home was left over from Christmas. Now, seeing Kath holding the bare little toy plane in her hand, she was embarrassed. "It's nothing," Lily whispered. "It's all right if you don't like it." Kath spun the wheels and smiled. "I like it." She slipped the airplane into her pocket and slid her hands around Lily's waist again.
"Do you want to go out to the show?"
"In a minute."
"Just a minute?"
Kath teased her. Lily laughed. She pulled Kath closer. She felt her smiling mouth against her own. Lily remembered the sight of that other couple beneath the stairs, and it was as if time had folded upon itself, and she couldn't tell if she was herself or someone else. How many girls had stood beneath these stairs, kissing? Lily envisioned a long line of girls like them cocooned in this dark pocket of beer-scented air. A shout suddenly went up from the bar, and the lights flashed in the hallway, startling them apart. Tommy abruptly stopped singing. The pianist halted in mid-phrase, and then Tommy's voice came over the speakers.
"I'm sorry to say we're calling it an early night, folks."
Voices rose at once in confusion and surprise, and the lights flashed again, repeatedly. "What's going on?" Lily asked. She glanced out into the hallway, which continued past their alcove beneath the stairs and ended in a closed door. Someone came running down the short hallway from the bar and went directly past them, knocking into Lily's shoulder. They opened the door at the end and plunged through, and just as Lily was stepping out from beneath the stairs, more women came. Dozens, all of them, it seemed, heading pell-mell for that door. Kath grabbed hold of a stranger's arm and asked, "What happened?" The woman was in a suit. She dragged her arm away and called over her shoulder, "Cops! The club's being raided!" Lily was still holding Kath's hand, and Kath squeezed her fingers as she peered down the hall at the door. It was a back exit. "Come on," Kath said. She tugged Lily into the hallway, joining the exodus. Lily could smell the fog seeping inside. Kath abruptly halted and dragged her out of the way. "Wait, I left my coat." The panic of the crowd was contagious, and Lily's only thought now was escape. "Can't you leave it?" Kath shook her head. "My identification's in the pocket. You go ahead. I'll meet you out there." "Isn't it fake? Just leave it." Lily wouldn't let go of her hand. "I forgot to leave my real one at home. I have to get it. You go. Meet me on our corner, okay?" Kath squeezed Lily's hand once more, and then Kath went back down the hall, going against the tide of women, leaving Lily alone. A woman brushed past her, advising, "You better get out of here, unless you want to get caught." Heart pounding, Lily followed everyone else outside and into a narrow alley. It was very dark, and it smelled like urine. Up above, the buildings loomed black against a cloud-covered night sky. Only a few windows were lit, and Lily was reminded of how late it was. Everyone emerging from the Telegraph Club seemed to be heading to one or the other end of the alley, and Lily went to the left. She thought that way was Columbus Avenue, but when she emerged onto a side street she didn't recognize, she stopped. She looked back down the alley. The open door cast a rectangle of yellow light onto the ground, illuminating a puddle of rank liquid that several women splashed through as they ran out of the building. There was no sign of Kath. Voices came now, loud and insistent. Men's voices, and then men in uniform, wielding flashlights. Lily fled across the unfamiliar street. There was a group of men there, standing and smoking in the shadow of a building. The embers at the ends of their cigarettes seemed to float in the air like tiny red eyes. They had probably seen her lingering in the mouth of the alley, and she ducked her head nervously, realizing she'd lost her scarf somewhere. She kept moving, even though she didn't know where she was going. She was approaching light and noise, but she kept her gaze lowered toward the stains and spots on the sidewalk, the darker shadow of the gutter running like a river beside her. The street was short and ended in a wide avenue. She had found Broadway again. To her left was a kaleidoscope of blue and white lights, rotating like a playland ride. A white neon sign hung from the side of the building closest to the lights. The Telegraph Club. With a jolt, she realized that several police cars were parked outside the club. A clump of women stood near the awning, huddled together as if for safety. A policeman stepped away from one of them, and Lily didn't understand what she was watching at first. It was only when the woman turned, her arms positioned unnaturally, that she understood that the policeman had handcuffed her. She spun around immediately and headed for Columbus Avenue. In her quick glimpse of the handcuffed women, she didn't think she had seen Kath. Maybe she had gone down the alley in the other direction. She might already be on Columbus. Lily quickened her pace. The traffic screamed past her, and someone was laughing too loud. Men tossed burning cigarettes onto the curb like tiny missiles to dodge. Someone called after her.
"Slow down and smile, sweetheart!"
She ignored him. She was almost there. She could see their corner in the distance. But no one was there when she arrived. The street lamp was shining on an empty sidewalk. She wasn't sure how long she stood there, shivering. It felt like hours. When she saw a police car cruising down Columbus, she shrank back into the shadows, but she knew she couldn't wait there all night. With a desperate, sinking feeling, she turned toward home and resolved to call Kath first thing in the morning. She would understand why Lily hadn't stayed on their corner. When she got home, she tried to be as quiet as possible, but she was clumsy from the cold and stumbled on the stairs. The door to her bedroom stuck, and she had to force it, with a rumble, to open. The silence afterward was unbearable. She heard the creak of bed springs, the squeal of her parents' bedroom door. She rushed to undress, shoving her clothes under her bed and pulling on her nightgown so fast she nearly tangled herself in the sleeves. She accidentally stubbed her toe against one of the bed's legs and couldn't suppress a yelp of pain. Tears smarting at her eyes, she climbed into her bed and pulled up the covers just in time. Her father was sliding open the door, saying,
"Lily, are you all right?"
She rolled over, pretending to be sleepy. "Yes, Papa."
"Couldn't sleep?"
"No." He came in and sat on the edge of her bed, switching on her bedside lamp, and she had to turn over to face him, schooling her face into emptiness. He placed a warm hand on her forehead.
"You're a little hot."
"I'm fine. I just couldn't sleep." He studied her for a moment, and she willed herself to look normal. Sleepless, maybe, but normal. And she must have succeeded, because he eventually removed his hand.
"All right. Well, if you're not feeling well in the morning, let me know."
"I will."
"Good night."
He turned off the lamp and left, sliding the pocket doors shut.